Gahag, the young boy's body went flying. He landed hard on his back, and the stone floor knocked the wind out of him. One glance at Gazef was all it took to find out what had happened. The older warrior retracted his leg after launching that heavy kick. Don't pay too much attention to the sword just because it's all your opponent is carrying. You might get kicked like this. That time, I aimed for your stomach, but usually they go for a less guarded area. They'll try to shatter your knees, or even if you've got your groin padded, a kick from metal greaves can rupture things. You need to keep an eye on your opponent's entire form and watch their every move. Yes, sir. Climb resisted the dull pain in his stomach and stood up. Gazef had tremendous physical strength. Kicking at full power, he could have easily broken Climb's ribs, male shirt or no, and rendered him unfit for combat. It was clear he hadn't kicked at full power and had instead aimed his foot to send Climb flying. He used no more strength than necessary, so this is training after all, thank you. It was sinking in that this was a lesson from the kingdom's strongest warrior. Climb was full of gratitude and reassumed a fighting stance. How precious was this chance? He had to take care not to let it end too soon. Climb raised his shield again and inched forward. Gazef silently watched. If things continued like this, it would merely play out the same as last time. As Climb approached, he was forced to rethink his strategy. Climb sensed overwhelming composure coming from the calmly waiting Gazef. He hadn't managed to draw out even a hint of his opponent's true strength. Being frustrated about his inability would probably be arrogant. Climb was already starting to reach his limits. Even though he always got up early to hone himself, his progress was slower than a snail's. Ever since he first picked up a sword, he had not improved fast enough. Even if he could condition his body to swing faster with heavier swords, he would probably still be unable to obtain specialized combat abilities. Surely, it was rude to wish that Gazef, the embodiment of talent, would use his full abilities when Climb was so incapable. He lamented that his own skill wasn't enough to warrant their attention. Telling him to approach their bout as if it were a real battle and not practice had probably been Gazef's way of saying that if Climb didn't fight with the intent to kill, he wouldn't even be worth sparring with. Climb ground his teeth audibly. He hated how weak he was. If only he was stronger, he could be more useful. With more power, he would be the princess's weapon and face head on those who sullied the kingdom, who caused the people to suffer. The princess had only one fragile sword, so she had to be careful when she wielded it, which racked Climb with guilt. But he immediately cleared those thoughts from his mind. What he needed now was to avoid drowning in negativity. He wanted to enhance his abilities, even slightly, by clashing with everything he had against this man who stood at the heights of human potential. He had only one thought in his heart. He wanted to be useful to the princess. Oh, Gazef murmured approvingly, his expression shifting slightly. It was because of the minute change he saw in the boy on the cusp of manhood in front of him. Up until a moment ago, Climb had been excited, like a child meeting a celebrity, but after the kick, that bubbly attitude vanished. He now had the face of a warrior. Gazef raised his guard a notch. He thought highly of Climb, perhaps more than the boy knew. He especially admired Climb's unwavering desire to better himself. His fervent devotion was akin to a religious faith. And then there was his swordsmanship. No one had taught Climb. He gleaned what he could by watching others train. His form was awkward and contained many extraneous movements. But unlike those who had unthinkingly studied exactly what they were taught, Climb considered the significance of each strike. He cultivated a style that focused on real combat, or to put it darkly, a killer's style. Gazef thought it was absolutely wonderful. In the end, a sword was a tool for murder. Someone trained for sports and display wouldn't be effective in a serious battle. Such a style wouldn't protect or save anyone. But Climb was different. He would cut down his enemies and safeguard whatever was precious to him. However, your attitude may have changed, but there is a clear gap between our ability levels. What are you going to do about that? To put it bluntly, Climb had no innate talent. Without that talent, he couldn't reach the heights of Gazef or Brain Unglaus. No matter how much harder he tried than everyone else, no matter how cruelly he tortured his flesh, it wouldn't matter. Climb's attempts to be the strongest were nothing but a dream or a delusion. So why was Gazef training Climb? Wouldn't it be more beneficial to spend his time on someone with more aptitude? The answer was simple. He couldn't stand around watching Climb expend pointless effort. If humans had a limit to their potential, then this boy was single-mindedly throwing himself at that wall over and over. Gazef pitied him for it. He wanted to show Climb another way. He believed that even if there was a limit to ability, there was no limit to experience. The other reason was that Gazef regretted his greatest opponent's appalling state. It's like I am doing this to make up for that which isn't fair to Climb, but still, it's not like he loses anything from going at it with me for a round. Come on, Climb. A response with spirit to break through Gazef's internal monologue came back to him. Sir. At the same time he replied, Climb dashed forward. Unlike before, Gazef slowly lifted his sword with a serious face. Then he brought it down from up high. If Climb received it with his shield, his approach would be halted completely. If he blocked with his sword, he'd be repelled. It was an attack that rendered defense purposeless. It was a bad idea to defend, but Climb had a broadsword whereas Gazef had a bastard sword. Climb's weapon was shorter. All he could do was leap. Gazef knew that, so he was waiting to intercept. It was like entering a tiger's den, but the young soldier hesitated only for a moment. Climb came within range of Gazef's sword. Gazef's swing was perfectly timed, and Climb braced against it with his shield. The tremendous shock was even more intense this time. Pain ran up Climb's arm and made him grimace. Too bad it ended up playing out the same as before. Gazef seemed slightly disappointed as he aimed his foot at Climb's stomach. But then Fortress. The moment Climb shouted, Gazef's face registered slight surprise. It wasn't as if the martial art Fortress couldn't be used without a sword or shield. It was quite possible with either a hand or armor. Reason it was commonly activated when defending with a sword or shield was due to how tight the timing needed to be. One false move when using it with armor could end with the warrior suffering the hit unprotected. So according to human psychology, most would want to activate it when blocking with something. But Climb knew when Gazef's kick would come, which solved the timing problem. You meant for that to happen? Yes, sir. The power in Gazef's kick vanished, as if something soft had absorbed it. His leg extended fully, and unable to drive any strength into it, he gave up and began to bring it back down. While Gazef was in this disadvantaged posture, Climb moved in to take his shot. Climb activated the martial art as he brought his sword down from high above. He wanted to create a single move he could unleash with confidence. He possessed no inborn talent, but he'd taken to heart advice a warrior had once given him. He desperately polished his overhead attack. Climb's body wasn't covered in an ostentatious layer of muscles. Nor was he blessed with a physique that easily put on muscle. He didn't have the agility to put extra bulk to good use. So he toned his body and achieved a specialized build through what had seemed like infinite repetition. The result was his downward swing from up high. His singular strike achieved a speed that could be considered extraordinary, which practically summoned a gale in its wake. That was what fell toward Gazef's head. Climb did not think his attack could be fatal. He unleashed his move with absolute conviction that a man of Gazef's caliber wouldn't die from something like this. A sharp clang rang out as the bastard sword rose to meet the descending broadsword. Gazef had anticipated even this far ahead. Climb used all the energy in his body to try and throw the older warrior off balance, but Gazef's body didn't budge. Even in an unsteady position on one foot, Gazef had no problem stopping a blow bearing the entirety of Climb's might. The man was like a great tree with thick roots deeply seated in the earth. Climb had used his martial art and all his strength. Even with those two things combined, he couldn't match one-footed Gazef. He was surprised to realize this, and then he looked to his stomach. Slicing with the broadsword had meant closing the distance. This made it possible for Gazef to kick him again. He jumped away just as the kick arrived. It was only a little dull pain. Then the two of them stared each other down a few paces apart. Gazef's eyes were happy, and his mouth curled in a grin. His expression was amused, but it contained no ill will. It was only a refreshing smile. It made Climb fidget, how Gazef beamed at him like a father proud of his son's improvement. Nice work. I am going to take this next one a little bit seriously. Gazef's expression changed. Fear coursed through Climb's entire body. The kingdom's strongest warrior had finally shown himself. I actually have one potion. If you end up with a broken bone or something, we can fix it up, so don't worry. Thank you. Hearing Gazef basically announce he was going to break one of his bones made Clime's heart pound. He was accustomed to injuries, but that didn't mean he liked them. Gazef charged twice as fast as Clime's previous approach. The bastard sword traced an extremely low arc, aimed at Clime's feet. Its tip practically scraped the ground. Flustered by the speed and centrifugal force, Clime protected his feet by gripping his broadsword blade down, as if to stick it into the floor. The two crashed together. That's what Clime thought, but suddenly, Gazef's bastard sword rose back up, slicing along the edge of the broadsword. KGH, Clime turned his entire body and face away from the bastard sword, which missed him by a tiny margin. The draft blew a few of his hairs away. Clime was terrified by how quickly Gazef had been able to corner him. He followed the bastard sword with only his eyes, but saw it suddenly stop sharp and come back around. Faster than he could think, his survival instinct seemed to drive him to thrust his shield forward when the bastard sword crashed into it with a shrill clang. And then Gar. With a sharp pain, Clime's body sailed sideways. When he fell to the floor, the shock knocked the weapon from his hands. The bastard sword had rebounded off the shield to the side, delivering a heavy impact to Clime's flank. Flow, don't think. First attack, then defend. You have to move in a way that connects you to your next stroke. Defending is but another part of the attack. As Clime retrieved his fallen sword and made to get up, holding his side, Gazef gently spoke to him. I held back so nothing would break. You're still good, right? What do you want to do? In contrast to Gazef, who didn't seem the least bit out of breath, Clime was panting from the pain and stress. If he couldn't last for more than a few exchanges like this, he was wasting Gazef's time, but he still wanted to improve, even if only slightly. He nodded at Gazef and held up his sword. Okay, then let us keep going. Yes, sir. With a hoarse shout, Clime raced forward. After being struck, launched away, and occasionally kicked or punched, Clime collapsed on the floor, out of breath. The cold stones leached the heat out of him through his mail and clothing, which felt good. He panted, and didn't even move to wipe the sweat off his face. He didn't have the energy to. Enduring the pain welling up in various locations, Clime was overwhelmed by the fatigue coursing through his entire body. He lightly closed his eyes. Good work. I tried to swing so you wouldn't get any breaks or fractures, but how are you feeling? Still lying on the floor, Clime moved his arms, examining the painful spots before opening his eyes. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong. I am hurting, but it should only be bruises. The throbbing aches he felt were far from serious. They wouldn't prevent him from guarding the princess. Okay, then you don't need the potion, huh? No, because if I overuse them, I won't get any of the benefits of strength training. Letting your muscles heal naturally makes them stronger, but if you use magic to restore them to their original state, then that doesn't happen. I understand. Are you now going to be bodyguard for the princess? Yes. Then I'll give this to you. Use it if you have any problems. He placed the potion next to Clime with a clink. Thank you. Clime sat up and looked at the man his sword had been unable to approach even once. The unscathed warrior asked in puzzlement, What? I was just thinking you amazing. Gazef had barely any sweat on his forehead. He wasn't out of breath. Sighing, Clime acknowledged the gap between the strongest man in the kingdom and himself, a boy lying on the floor. In response, Gazef grinned awkwardly. Oh, I see. How I can really answer how I got this strong. I just had some inborn talent, that's all. I learned to fight during my mercenary days, by the way. The nobles always complain about how vulgar my kicks are, but I learned those back then too. There were no tricks to getting stronger, Gazef declared. He easily denied the small hope Clime had clung to, the belief that he might be able to grow more powerful if he continued his current training. In that sense, it has a good style for you, Clime punching, kicking, a style where you use your arms and legs like that. You think so? Yeah, not being trained as a swordsman or soldier will work in your favor. People tend to focus on blade work once they have a sword in their hands, but I don't think that's very smart. In a real fight, a doctrine that fully utilizes the hands and feet with the sword as simply another offensive option should prove more useful. It's kind of fighting dirty, but it works for adventurers. Clime dropped his usual expressionless manner and smiled. He never thought the strongest man in the kingdom would hold such a high opinion of his sword skills or his inconsistent, unorthodox movements. Climb knew the nobles scoffed at his style from the shadows, so praise like this was a big deal for him. All right, I am going to head out. I need to be ready for breakfast with the king. Are you okay on time? Yes, the princess will have a visitor today. A visitor? One of the nobles. Gazef wondered who the princess would be entertaining, and Climb answered from the Aindra family. Aindra? Oh, then which one? Blue, right? I can imagine it would be the red one. Yes, from the blue roses. Gazef was visibly relieved. Ah, I see, so her friend is coming. Gazef seemed to guess that Rena didn't want Climb at breakfast with her friend, but Climb had actually declined an invitation. Even if he had the kind of relationship with her that allowed it, refusing an offer from one of the royal family would definitely have made Gazef frown. So Climb said nothing and left the details up to the older man's imagination. As for Aindra herself, she was also acquainted with Climb through Rena and was friendly with him. She wouldn't react badly like the other nobles if he came to breakfast, but Rena had few female friends. He figured she could get more of that rare girl talk without a guy around. Thank you for today, Captain Gazef. Now don't worry about it. I had fun too. If you don't mind, could you train me again sometime? Gazef wasn't sure what to say, but faster than Climb could notice and apologize, the captain responded. Sure, as long as we can find a time and place where no one else is around. Climb knew what the conflict had been, so he didn't say anything awkward. He flexed his creaking muscles and stood up. He did, however, express his honest thoughts. Thank you. Gazef gave a benevolent wave and got moving. Okay, let us clean up. There'll be trouble if I don't make it to breakfast on time. Oh, and that swing from overhead is pretty good. You just need to think about how to follow up in case your opponent dodges or blocks it. Yes, sir. 43 Late Fire Moon, September 6:22 a.m. After leaving Gazef and wiping himself down with a damp towel, Climb went to a place very different from the large practice hall. This room was as spacious as the training area he'd come from. Many people sat on benches, chatting. An appetizing scent suffused the warm atmosphere. It was the mess hall. Cutting across the room, weaving through the noise, Climb joined the line behind a few others. Following the people in front of him, Climb took dishes from the arranged stacks. On his tray, he placed a wooden plate and a wooden stew bowl, then a wooden cup. Everyone received their food in order. A large steamed potato, brown bread, a white stew with a decent helping of fixings, pickled cabbage, a sausage. From Climb's perspective, it was a luxurious meal. The array of all those things on his tray gave off inviting smells. Suddenly feeling hungry, Climb looked out across the mess hall. The soldiers ate with a lot of commotion. They made idle chat with their neighbors. They talked about what they would do on their next day off, the food, their families, and mundane stories about their work. Climb spotted an empty seat and made his way through the busy room. He straddled the bench and sat down. Soldiers were on either side of him, having nice chats with their friends. As Climb sat down, the ones nearest him spared him just a glance before looking away. They seemed disinterested. It was like there was a lull that surrounded only Climb. From the outside, it seemed odd. Lively conversations went on all around him, but not a single person called out to him. Certainly not many people would randomly talk to a stranger. But considering they were soldiers serving at the same place, entrusting their lives to one another when on duty, this treatment was a bit strange. It was like he didn't exist. Climb didn't make an effort to talk to anyone. Either he knew where he stood. The guardians of Rolent Castle were not ordinary military. The kingdom's soldiers included levies outfitted by landed nobility. There were also soldiers who were like a private army, whose wages were paid by city officials. And there were the guards, who mainly patrolled the city. They all shared one thing: their commoner backgrounds. But there were various problems with entrusting peasants of unknown origin with the castle's protection and bringing them so close to the royal family and all the kingdom's sensitive intelligence. Accordingly, the soldiers who guarded Rolent Castle needed a recommendation from a noble. If a soldier caused any issues, the vouching noble would be held responsible. So the candidates were necessarily of clearly established identity with no evidence of problems with their thoughts or behavior. But something had developed as a result of this system. Factions. The nobles who supplied castle guard nominees all belonged to one or another of them. Naturally, the soldiers aligned themselves with the affiliations of their patrons. Those who would defy their noble would rarely be elected, so it wasn't an exaggeration to say there were virtually no soldiers who eschewed factionalism. At first glance, this setup appeared wholly detrimental, but if there was an advantage, it was that because conflict between factions could potentially spark a war, the soldiers were expected to apply themselves diligently.